Good morning and a very warm welcome to day 2 of Embedded World 2023 here in Nuremberg. It's great to have you here, and I believe the first day of Embedded World went very well. I believe we had packed sessions here in the conference, lots of interesting discussions, and also exhibition-wise, I believe everybody was happy, or rather complaining that there have been too many people, which is a nice complaint, I believe. This year's Embedded World has a sub-logo which was embedded, responsible and sustainable. And especially for today, we want to concentrate on the second word. For this, we have the keynote of today, where we talk about the activities of IEEE 7000, and it's a huge honor, pleasure, and I believe also added value for all of us to have Ali Hessami here with us, who is chairman of the group. Ali Hessami is currently Director of R&D and Innovation at Vega Systems. His extensive track record in systems assurance, safety and security, sustainability, knowledge assessment is very long. He has a background, of course, in technology. We just discussed this. So coming to the topic from a technical background, but I believe many of us who have to deal with these issues have a technical background, so I believe especially his approach will be very valuable. He joined the Standards Association group of IEEE in 2017 and is now, as I said, chair of the Peace 7000 standard. In November 2018, he also was appointed as the VC and process architect of the IEEE's Global Ethics Certification Program for Autonomous and Intelligent Systems. So I believe we cannot have a better speaker than Ali, and I would now like to invite you to the stage and looking forward to listen to your keynote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Axel, for that warm welcome. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I have the pleasure of sharing experience of something I didn't know about, as Axel mentioned, some 7 years ago. And due to deep interest and enthusiasm, I ended up inheriting some responsibilities. The quick journey I'd like to take you through is the story of where I started and where we are heading on a global level for understanding the societal and people and planet dimension of technology. Because we often focused on technicality and commerciality of technology, and what happens to the planet and people at the end of our services is not usually our business. And I'm going to persuade you that it is our business. As technologists, as scientists, we have as much responsibility in this as philosophers and regulators. I have the honor and pleasure of being involved in 2 major IEEE programs. One is standardization, which I'll tell you about quickly. And the other one is a ethics and autonomous systems certification program. What I'd like to cover today is just to give a quick introduction to these programs and then jump deeply as a technologist myself, someone who used to design embedded systems before I got involved in standardization and regulation. And hopefully, by the end of this talk, I'd like to persuade you that you don't need to necessarily have expertise in this. This is part and parcel of our societal duties. Just few things about IEEE. Most of you in technology would invariably know about IEEE, but very quickly, it's the largest global professional organization, present in 160 countries and more than 400,000 members. That fluctuates between 400,000 to 450,000, that kind of thing. There are many societies. Most of you would be members of ComSoc or Computer Society, SSIT, etc. And there are a huge number of annual conferences and publications, etc. IEEE, believe it or not, is also involved in standardization. There is an arm of IEEE called SA, a Standards Association, that's heavily involved in development of technology standards, particularly the most popular one that I often refer to is the 802.11, the Wi-Fi standard that we are all using today to make a connection to the local server. So there are many standards, currently around 1,500 standards published by IEEE. There are many corporate members, large companies and SMEs, many individuals, and many participants in IEEE. Because the talk is largely about philosophy and merged with technology today, I'd like to clarify some of the terminology before we go further, because we keep using these words, and I, as a semi-academic, I like to share some concepts with you. One is the concept of ethics. The ethics itself is a branch of knowledge that actually underpins our decisions. And this is what we want to embed in our solutions, in our technology, products and services and designs, etc. The morals are the rights and wrongs that we probably use ethical concepts to come to. And then we come to this concept of embedded systems and autonomous systems, which are becoming more popular with the likes of AI and GPT, etc. And these are the systems that make decisions without human oversight or intervention. Therefore, the key characteristic of an autonomous system is that it can make a decision without prior human authorization and validation. It can actually act on that decision and do something about it in a real world, and then it can adapt based on the reactions it gets from the real world. So truly, this is hugely different to automation that we are used to. We have never had machines that decide about our fate, about our rights, and that's why this concept of ethics is suddenly hitting the agenda. It's not just popular because philosophy has become as important as computer science, it's because suddenly we have machines that are acting almost in the capacity of other human beings. So, the general concept is that now we're becoming increasingly dependent on most of the computing and telecommunication technologies, and our own influence and role is diminishing. We have little say in the way these things are going and how they operate, etc. And most of them are driven by market demands and multinationals, and therefore there are innovations involved, and unfortunately, there is not enough regulation and control about these either. They happen to come and hit the market much faster than there is law to control them. So we need a degree of transparency by the service providers and product developers. We need accountability in the sense of who is accountable, who is to take the blame should things not quite work out the way intended. As you recall, because we are dealing with largely autonomous systems, data-driven algorithmic systems. We need to also be able to explain decisions made by autonomous systems. We can't say this is a deep neural network, we haven't got a clue how it comes up with these decisions. It decided to fire this way rather than that way. There is a necessity for so-called explainability. Then we have our own traditional domain of privacy and dignity. As individuals, our space, our private space is being invaded by these autonomous systems. You go online, they want to profile you, they want to know everything about you, even your speed of keystroke or the way you look or the sites you visit is data for somebody. And if you next time, you just quickly click on cookies and accept all the cookies, just ask to see the list of companies who are collecting your data. I can assure you there is typically about 60 to 100 companies who are paying for collecting your data by somebody else. And all of these, you don't have a clue who they are, what business they are in, what are they going to use your speed or interest profile in. They are declared by necessity, but we are giving a lot of our dignity and privacy away to basically advancing autonomous technology. Then we come to the dimension that Axel referred to. Are these technologies fair? Are they actually free from bias? And are the companies that develop these subject to some form of responsible governance? Are they being controlled in a fair and accountable manner? And unfortunately, you would also realize that not only law is always behind chasing its own tail, technology moves much faster than the law. So we are always exposed as a society to the innovations of the multinationals. Unfortunately, also, what is immoral behavior is not illegal. And there are many examples of that. So companies get away because there is no law to grab them or take them and charge them for some violation. So there is a space for really changing our attitude towards emergence of autonomy and data-driven algorithmic systems. This is not just a faster, bigger, more exciting space. This is technically a kind of an industrial revolution that's happening, and it's very different to whatever happened in the past history of mankind, because we are now having new masters who decide alongside our interests. There are many examples. Of course, I've referred to there are studies that profile your psychological state, depending on which kind of music streaming selections you make. And then that data gets sold to boilerplate investment companies that this guy is depressed or is happy or is looking for adventure, etc. So this is the kind of data that's inferred, and we never knew it is of value to somebody. In the UK, they started looking at mood of the society and say, let's ask Spotify, see what kind of music is the nation listening to. And if they are happy, we can give them some bad news. And if they are depressed, we keep the bad news for the time being, because the reactions could be very different. So the interpretations of what's happening is really beyond anyone's imagination. How on earth could a central bank, for example, not announce its interest rate rise because Spotify says the nation is listening to depressing music, they are not in a good mood? Don't make bad news that present. We all heard about Cambridge Analytica quite a few years ago. Just to give you a measure of it, Facebook's earnings in 2017 were of the order of $40 billion, and they were only fined £500,000 for the violations of giving our personal data to this dodgy company, Cambridge Analytica. We tried to actually talk to the directors and senior analysts of Cambridge Analytica afterwards for an IEEE speech. They refused to come along. You can guess why. Anyway, so there are many. In fact, what we do in our IEEE committee work, we keep an eye on what we call a shenanigans list. And this is just an example of our shenanigans list, and it's increasing by the day. There is enormous list of violations, abuse, misuse, on virtually everything from political people to commercial people to vested interests in there. In the United Kingdom, some engineering institutions woke up to, well, yes, there is now a concern about our privacy, our dignity, etc., transparency, and not knowing what's happening inside these autonomous systems. So the so-called Royal Academy of Engineering an engineering council of the United Kingdom came up with some fundamental rules. So please be honest in what you do as an engineer technologist, respect life and law and the environment, try and be academically and scientifically rigorous, and also observe good leadership. Going a bit deeper into the concepts of ethics, the dominant schools of thought as far as ethics go, and these are in the IEEE 7000 standards that I'll talk about a bit more in detail, are these three categories. Even though we started with these three and added one extra category in the standard. One is the general concept of utilitarianism, put forward by John Stuart Mill, philosopher who actually treats basically ethics as kind of an economic function and a happiness function, and you're after maximization and optimization. So whatever you do, if it brings maximum pleasure to maximum number of people, excuse me, it's okay. As far as John Stuart Mill, utilitarianism or consequentialism is concerned. Then we've got Immanuel Kant's what's called a categorical imperative or the ontological duty ethics. And this is about the responsibility of senior decision makers. They say, put yourself in the shoes of those who are going to be affected by your decision. Would you like it if you were treated like this? In a sense, take a kind of a switch your position and don't use people to achieve your own end. Be, if you like, more empathic and sensible towards the needs of the end users. And then we've got Aristotle, who probably started it all in terms of what we call virtue ethics, the personal characteristics that we want members of the society, such as being good, being honest, being virtuous, etc., are all should be espousing, as well as, in a sense, are our solutions, our websites, our embedded devices and solutions actually going to affect the virtues of the people? So-called virtue ethics. What we did, we added a fourth category to this in the standard that we developed, and I'll quickly go through it. And that category says, these are typically the dominant schools of thought. This is how we think about ethics these days. But if you have your own version, if you believe in Ubuntu or some Latin American Mayan school of philosophy, that's okay too. It's not as if largely Western mindsets and concepts are dominating the scope of ethics that we have to bear in mind. I often refer to technology ethics, that as I try to persuade you, we all have a duty and a role in a number of key categories. And the reason for this will come evident as we go along. One is, if we have an autonomous system that's making decisions about our life, about education, about our access to finance and health, etc., is it suffering from bias? Is it discriminating against a particular group because of gender, because of age, because of state of where they were born, height, etc., weight, etc.? That's one. The other one is element of explainability. As I mentioned, can we explain what's happening inside the autonomous systems, data-driven systems, because we didn't design them on the classical control theory of functional design. These are no longer specific functions. They are driven by what data tells the algorithms and that reality is about. Then is element of accountability and respect for privacy and dignity. And then comes this business of, most of those are attributes of products and systems. In a sense, the top 4. Then responsible governance talks about, what about the organization? The company that makes this solution. Say, let's pick on autonomous vehicles that soon, next 10 years or so, be all over the place. Are these companies who are designing these in terms of software, in terms of service delivery, actually well governed when it comes to feeling responsible for impact on people and planet? Then is concept of fairness. We really, as humans, have a kind of a hardwired feeling about fairness. If you take 2 small kids, 2-year-old, and give one of them a sweetie and not the other one, as the other one would soon complain, that's not fair. I should also receive a sweetie because that's a principle. We recognize fairness fairly intrinsically in our life, and we should have fairness built in our technological solutions. That's the argument here. And finally, these are the concepts of safety and security, which are traditional one that I've been dabbling in, God knows, 30-odd years, as far as technological design of systems to be free from potential for harm and be secure from malicious intentions and also be dependable in general terms. What all of this means is that if we want to look at ethics of what we do, and it really doesn't matter where we fit in the supply chain or chain of decision making, whether we are the designer or just a service provider or maintenance company or data company or component company, we just sell the chips to these guys built it into an embedded solution. We need to take what we call a global ecosystem perspective on this. We can't just say, my role is here, I don't think I'm affecting anything, I'm just selling, I don't know, sockets for the devices that are plugged in on my PCB. So I have no role in this. So we have a whole range of stakeholders and players that get engaged in making sure ultimately the impact on people and planet, so to speak, is acceptable. Until recently, we haven't really bothered about these things. Until recently, all we care about is the functionality okay? Is it commercially advantageous? Do we have a market? What's the price? Is it packaged well, etc.? Suddenly, we become a lot more engaged and involved. I told you about IEEE Standard Association and my own involvement in the work of the Standard Association. They started around 6 years ago on 2 major initiatives. One to do with developing what we call high-impact standards as far as technology and ethics, because it was actually attractive to me as an embedded system designer myself that I'd never heard anyone talk about social impact when I'm designing my systems. I couldn't connect the dots and see the relevance. So these are some other regulator or philosopher's business, nothing to do with me. So they came to life what's called the 7000 series of standards. Most of them are almost finished because they started many years ago. I got involved in the top one, IEEE 7000, that was eventually published after 5 years in 2021. And that offers you a model process for addressing ethical concerns when you're designing systems. Of course, much of the focus is on data-driven algorithmic autonomous systems, but we don't make too much of that. If you are a system designer, architect, whatever, that standard gives you guidelines. And in fact, the 3 philosophical schools of utilitarianism, the ontological school, and the virtue ethics is built into IEEE 7000. The rest of it, the red ones are those that are published already, And because, as you well know, most of you, if you are in design and development or marketing of technology, you know that the Standard Development Organization, SDOs, typically sell their standards for a reasonably high price. IEEE's made these freely available. So you can go to IEEE.org and download under a program called GET, G-E-T, download most of these for free. So there is less of an excuse. I didn't know about it, or I didn't have $300 to pay for this, to read it, etc. They have made it available to actually broadcast the message and the spirit of these. So the red ones are published already and available. The rest of them are in the final stages of development and be published hopefully around end of this year at the latest. The one I mentioned that I got interested in some 6 years or so ago is IEEE 7000. This is try to create a new guidance for technologically oriented people such as us, engineers, technologists, designers, developers, code and hardware people, how to actually build human values into what you do. Because you could say, well, I only deal with functional attributes. I don't have a clue. These are soft, fuzzy stuff. I can't deal with this stuff. Convert it into a function, give it to me. I'll build it into my solution. The standard itself is based on 7 core processes and basically says you need to understand the context of what your product is going to do, talk to people who are going to be affected by it, and identify what values you're going to impact for these people. Values, these are ethical values, like honesty and virtues that we have spoken about. Then convert these values into system requirements, and then go about designing these system requirements that are based on ethics alongside commercial requirement, functional requirement, technical requirement, quality, reliability requirement, etc. So the real virtue of this standard is about converting human values, and specifically those that are going to be influenced by a product, into alongside traditional requirement engineering and system design characteristics. It actually deals with cultural issues. It deals with ethical issues and sensitivities. It deals with who are the stakeholders. It actually defines a number of new roles in technology companies. One particular one is a value lead, because this kind of thinking is too new and too unfamiliar for most companies who are dealing with technology. So ideally, there needs to be somebody who understands how to generate this value-based requirement. And now there's a school of design called value-based engineering that is promoted by a good colleague of mine, Professor Spiekermann of Vienna University, and she actually even teaches that. In this 7000 standard, we have put all those 3 additional way of looking at the product and service to establish its intersection or interaction with human values. And actually, it is fairly universal. That is, it can work with agile development. It can work with classical bathtub type, waterfall type, life cycle development. Virtually any form of system design that you have or you're used to can relate to. The second thing I would like to quickly take you through is what we call an ethics certification program. So IEEE started developing this 7000 series multiple standards that are largely there, and we keep adding to them. And then we decided there is a way we would like to characterize systems, not so much in terms of telling people how to design and how to incorporate this and test and that kind of thing, but we want to actually measure how much ethics is there into a product. And this is a very different way of looking at it. So if I look at my mobile phone, that's a universal addition to everyone's portfolio these days. can I measure how much transparency is exercised by the maker of this mobile phone? Can I measure how much accountability there is? Can I measure degree of bias that's built into this, etc.? We started by looking at accountability, bias, and respect or measures of transparency and explainability, and basically decided to form expert groups. This work started in late 2018, and by 2019 we had expert groups who were selected for their expertise on those three areas of bias, accountability, and transparency. The general goal was to try and understand how do we characterize, for example, accountability. So the way we did it was to use a mind map to develop model-based approach, not text-based approach. We knew we are already developing those 7,000 series of standards. In fact, I was leading the development of the 7,000, IEEE 7000 itself. But the point was we wanted a different way of measuring these ethical characteristics. This is just an illustration of the models we developed back in 2019 that define accountability. There is one that defines transparency, and these are completely from a blank sheet. We didn't do a Google search. We didn't do a literature search to see what people say about these things, and we just add new things. We said, forget everything. We bring the competent people and ask those people, what is accountability about? What is transparency about? And finally, on algorithmic bias, which is one of the biggest concerns about autonomous systems, we also built a model that includes all the parameters that we need to measure in order to understand how much bias exists in a solution, whether that solution is giving me access to buying insurance or schooling or access to health, etc. By the time we finished, we also added various roles. They say we need to focus on developers of system integrators. We need to focus on system operators or supply chain, as well as regulators. And the final thing that we added to our understanding of how to measure ethics in products and services was to risk-base it. So we said there are three levels, what we call baseline, low impact, compliant, medium impact, and critical, high impact. So in a sense, if somebody came and said, here's a product, could you measure it for bias? We first decide whether the impact on the society and the planet, people and planet, is going to be low, medium, and high. And that determines how much examination that system needs to have. Here is obviously a data structure illustration of our criteria that I'll show you some publications. You can see this in those publications. Again, the publications are made available for free via IEEE under so-called Creative Commons license. Where we got to now, after almost 3.5 years of work, is that we have got criteria that measure transparency, accountability, degree of algorithmic bias, and we have added, as you remember from the big list, ethical privacy to this, so we can measure how much respect for privacy is in any technological solution, whether it's a website or an embedded system with a real-time operating system, etc. And we also decided that most of the things that we have developed in terms of criteria apply to products. We need to also understand the spirit and nature of the organization behind these products. So the organization cannot hide and say, I only supply these things, these people sell it, these people operate it, got nothing to do with me. You will see later that the regulators have woken up to the realities of autonomous systems, algorithmic data-driven systems, and laws are coming fairly rapid and fast. So as I mentioned, unfortunately, laws always chase the tail of technology and not as fast and not as many. That's why these standards fill the gap. Until the law is in place, there's nothing else. It's the Wild West. And that's our effort in the IEEE work. We have also developed, on top of developing criteria, a kind of a assessment methodology. So if somebody comes with a product and say, this product is a drone that's used for emergency service provision, could you tell me what's wrong with this? Is this ethical enough? Is it intruding on people's privacy? Or is it accountable enough, etc.? So we have developed a whole certification system at IEEE that's being rolled out internationally this year. From January 2023, the system is available together with some training program. So people who come get some we ask them to give us what we call a CONOP, a concept of operation of the product, whether it's embedded or end user or whatever type of operation. We do a kind of a quick impact assessment to see what's the level of risk this product is creating for people and planet. And then we tell them, we believe your main concern is accountability based on the risk profile that we did with you. And that exercise is very short. It's a couple of days of effort between the supplier and IEEE experts or IEEE authorized experts. The ultimate goal is for the people who want a certificate to put what we call a case for ethics. So we guide them, we give them a template and say, you need to put all your argument why your product, which is selling insurance or health or education or travel to somebody, is adequately ethical. They submit it for and apply for certification, ethics certification, not technical or EMI or RFI type thing. And they receive an assessment and progression report that actually tells them what they're doing, which is great, what they are not doing adequately, and where they are failing, and what they should do about it. So this is as comprehensive as it gets, not just telling people you have to consider ethics, it's important, the law is coming, etc. We have developed the entire process with the actual hand-holding rather than punitive that you failed in ethics, you don't get a certificate. The intent is to help and guide people along. We also developed a training program that IEEE delivers to global audience. We have run probably 3 or 4 of these globally, and virtually people from all the 5 continents have participated in this training program. And the next one is happening 27th to 31st of March, which is a week or so from now. And these are online program, a very extensive training program for training what we call assessors, who can qualify to become an assessor of ethics in products. Anyone who is interested can register for training program, but the training, as you would see, is not enough by itself. There is something else that we have added if people want to become authorized global assessors for ethics of technology. The other thing that I mentioned is a range of publications that we have eventually caught up with last year, because our work started in 2019. We call these ontological specifications because they actually paint the high-level view of what does it mean to say I am respectful of privacy of my customers or my stakeholders. These ontological specs give you the high-level perspective and what in principle we refer to as drivers and inhibitors. What are the factors that help with privacy? What are the factors that take away from privacy? So we refer to these as drivers and inhibitors, and we obviously try to encourage people to have more of the drivers, the good activities and features, and reduce the risk of what we call inhibitors. So there is an ontological spec for privacy. There is an ontological spec published for algorithmic bias. There's ontological spec produced for ethical transparency. There is one developed and published and made freely available for download from IEEE on ethical accountability. And the latest one that probably is being published as we speak, either this week or next week, is on responsible governance. What does it mean to say we are a responsible company? And frankly, even though the focus of most of these ethical publications are about technology, you can apply it to your company and say, what does it mean for this company to claim it's transparent? What does it mean for this company to claim it's accountable? To claim it's free from bias towards staff and clients and customers, etc. So it is fairly universal, but the real intent or the principal intent has been technology. So that's where we are today. We've got these 5 suites of criteria, and you can see how many exam questions there are in each of these criteria. All of them are based on model-based articulation rather than a standard with thousands of bullet points. Do this, do that, measure this, test that, etc., unlike the standards. And the other thing that I'd like to highlight is this. Most of the criteria that I've spoken about, transparency, accountability, bias, etc., in the language of standardization are horizontal. That is, they're not about electronics, they're not about energy systems, they're not about transportation, and it is possible to take one of these and generate a specialized version. We call these verticals. So we are currently working on verticals. We are working on health, mobility application like autonomous cars that's going to hit the road, or if in some places already, in financial services, and any other subsystem. So if somebody came and said, do you have transparency for financial services, selling, I don't know, Bitcoin products to people, we can create that from a generic horizontal standard with the help of experts from financial services sector, because our criteria are general, universal, and the architecture that we are applying here is quite important, because we are not going to be able to generate standards for the entire industry. So what we have done, we've generated the master sources in the style of cooking Oriental food, and we can pick any of these and flavor it for the particular application with the knowledge and expertise of people from that industry. So we are already developing a profile for autonomous cars that can lead to certification, ethics certification of autonomous cars from Chinese manufacturers, from German manufacturers, from US manufacturers who until now say, oh, well, my level 3 led to an accident. It wasn't me. It was the person who fell asleep, etc. We want to understand how much ethics there is in their claim and in their product. We also applied some of our work in a major European city who decided they wanted to be independently certified for ethics of what they do with their citizens. Vienna was the first global city who approached IEEE and said, we are putting some AI and autonomy and some of our material online. Can you help us judge ourselves? But be independent. Tell us what we are doing right, where we might be interfering with the rights and, if you like, values of our citizens. It took 2020 to complete this work with Vienna, and 2021 they received the first global certificate for a responsible city governing body who actually has qualified under IEEE regime for being ethical and being responsible towards their citizens. So the story is that we need to take a global and ecosystem perspective on what we do. This is not just narrow bits of technology and hiding behind, I'm only a small supplier in the big chain, I have nothing to do. Everyone has a role. So you can see the range of key players. And the other thing that we have added to our system is what we call a regulatory mechanism called competency framework. So people who want to get involved in the work of IEEE, they want to be trainers, they want to be auditors, they want to be assessors of technology ethics. As I mentioned, it's not just enough to say, I've been on the training and I've got a good mark, and we expect a very high performance on those trainings. Pass mark is typically 70%. Anyone below 70% doesn't make it. So we are developing profiles that who qualifies to be an assessor, and competence, as you know, is much bigger than just how much do you know, because they know that from the training. There is a whole host of other things, but the ultimate aim of this is to be able to be authorized by IEEE as a global assessor. And it would go on a registry, and everyone would be able to check that this gentleman or this lady is actually recognized Class 1 or Class 2 assessor of technology ethics. Just to finish, I mentioned that, of course, standards fill a gap. There are voluntary instruments that are not enforced by law, etc. But if you look at the Algorithmic Accountability Bill in the US, these are the flavor of things that are appearing because the regulators want to protect the society. And there is all sorts of requirements, including this business of impact assessment. Before you're allowed to market your product, there needs to be a measure of assessing how much impact there would be on people and planet. And in much closer to home here, we are having the European AI Act that's most likely going to be ratified next few months. And this is going to put obligations on anyone who so-called produces high-risk systems. And we are, IEEE, for your information, is closely collaborating with the European Union in implementation of AI Act. We have made all of our standards and all of our certification systems available to European Union, and they are well aware of it and very appreciative of it as well. So, to finish, we are dealing with emerging technologies that I try to persuade you to regard as potentially an industrial revolution. It's not just another incremental improvement in technological performance. We are dealing with matters of agency and autonomous decision-making. A lot of these cross-cut across what we regard as human rights and human values, and which is close to our heart. We need to encourage everyone involved in this supply chain to adopt a responsible innovation attitude, and corporate social responsibility, old-fashioned stuff, is no longer enough, because these are major influencers globally, and we need to start looking at how do we deliver our duty of care towards humanity, not just towards my customer. And obviously, if we go to an independent organization and ask them, such as City of Vienna did in their products, in their AI-based solutions for their citizens, we need to find out where are we doing well, where do we need to beef up on our approaches and processes. And the process that IEEE has developed, by far not the only global solution, but one of the most comprehensive and long-established solutions in the making for the last 6-7 years, is a mechanism to actually increase societal confidence in the ethicality of whatever product, medical, transportation, education, etc. And this is ultimately a basis for civil society to put their trust in that service. Okay, it doesn't translate into functions and quality and price, etc., but it is about, as close as it gets, about human attributes. There is a list of references that give you overviews of various publications. Everything that I've told you are generally the ones that I have shared with you are available for download from IEEE, because they just felt these standards should be made available free from commercial considerations. So anyone who wished and tried and didn't get hold of them, do let me know, and I'll be more than happy to guide you where to search for this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dear Ali, thank you very much for this perfect keynote. I believe it was brilliant. I learned a lot. I believe all of us did. Well structured, packed with information, and a very difficult important, challenging topic from an engineer to engineers. So perfect. We are a little bit tight in the time. If you have any urgent question, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I would refer you to the panel discussion that is being executed tomorrow, also with Ali on the stage. Panel discussion on the topic of responsible AI, tomorrow at 11:30 on the forum in Hall 3. Tomorrow, 11:30, forum Hall 3. Is there any urgent question that you would like to ask now? Otherwise, I believe Ali will be around also afterwards and for the day, so please come along. No very urgent question, then thank you very much. Enjoy the sessions, enjoy the conference, and thanks again, Ali.
Pleasure.